Have you ever wondered whether, just beneath the gentle waves that quietly kiss the shore, an entire city might still exist, a place that people once called home? Not merely the scattered remains of a sunken ship, not just a few ancient pottery fragments resting silently on the ocean floor, but stone-paved streets that still bear the traces of countless footsteps, stairways once climbed each morning by ordinary people, temples where prayers once echoed beneath sacred roofs, and bustling squares once filled with the laughter of a civilization that has long disappeared from the surface of the earth. Human beings have always carried a quiet belief that the cities they build will outlive them. We raise walls of stone. We construct harbors that open toward the endless sea. We build temples that stretch upward as though reaching for the heavens themselves. And deep within us lives the hope that these creations will endure through generation after generation. Yet history tells us another story. Sometimes, only a single earthquake lasting a few brief minutes. Sometimes, only a gradual rise of a few meters of sea level over the course of centuries, or even a silent shift beneath the Earth's crust, is enough to erase an entire city from the map. Carl Gustav Jung once suggested that what sinks beneath the surface does not necessarily disappear. The same is true within the human mind. Forgotten memories continue to exist in the unconscious, patiently waiting for the moment they may be rediscovered. The ocean seems to possess a memory of its own. It does not simply swallow cities, it quietly preserves them. For thousands of years, beneath those deep blue waters lie not only stone and sand, but also stories of hope, ambition, faith, and the unfinished dreams of people who once believed their homeland would endure forever. Tonight, we will journey together through 100 fascinating truths about cities that now rest beneath the sea. We will discover why once powerful civilizations disappeared, what still awaits archaeologists on the ocean floor, and why some places have remained astonishingly well preserved after thousands of years. Along the way, we will visit remarkable places such as Pavlopetri, Thonis Heracleion, Baiae, Port Royal, and Lion City, listening to stories that the sea has kept hidden for centuries. This is not merely a journey through history. It is also a journey into the human mind, because every sunken city reflects something deeply familiar within our own lives. Things that once shone brilliantly before slowly fading into silence. Memories that seem lost, yet continue to exist in the deepest chambers of the soul. Perhaps that is why cities beneath the sea have always captivated the human imagination. They remind us that what disappears from our sight does not necessarily disappear from the world. If you enjoy historical stories told with a gentle rhythm, rich emotion, and illuminated through the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung and thoughtful reflections on human nature, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each week, we will embark together on another journey through time, a place where history is not simply retold, but gently experienced, like a peaceful dream before the night comes to its quiet close. And now, take one slow, gentle breath. Allow your mind to soften. Let the sound of the waves carry us away from the shores of the present, diving slowly into the vast ocean of memory, where cities that have slept for thousands of years are quietly waiting for their stories to be told once again. Perhaps nowhere on Earth inspires both curiosity and humility quite like the ocean. During the day, its surface reflects the bright blue sky. Sunlight dances upon the waves, making the world seem vast, peaceful, and full of possibility. But when night falls, the sea becomes a dark mirror, concealing everything beyond the reach of human eyes. We know that beneath those waters lie coral reefs, schools of fish, extraordinary creatures that have never even been given names. And yet there is something else that makes the ocean unlike anywhere else on Earth. Cities, streets, public squares, stone stairways, bustling harbors, temples once filled with the fragrant smoke of prayer. All of them now rest in silence beneath the water. When we think of a city, we usually imagine something enduring, built from stone, from brick, from concrete, from structures that people believe will outlast their own lives. Perhaps this is one of humanity's deepest longings, not merely to live, but to leave behind a trace of ourselves, to build a place where generations yet unborn may one day walk upon the very stones we laid with our own hands, from ancient Mesopotamia to Egypt, to Greece, to Rome, and even to the great cities of our modern world. Human beings have always built cities as though they would last forever. The walls became taller, the harbors grew wider, the palaces became ever more intricate. Every generation has sought to create something more enduring than the one before it. Somewhere deep within the human soul lives the quiet hope of overcoming time itself. Carl Gustav Jung believed that within the collective unconscious dwell symbols whose vitality transcends entire ages. Among them is the image of the city, not merely as a place to live, but as a symbol of order standing in the midst of chaos. Long before our ancestors built cities, they lived among forests and open plains, where nature remained almost impossible to control. Rain, storms, floods, wild animals, darkness, each represented uncertainty. Then human beings began building villages. Later came towns, and finally, cities. This was not only the evolution of architecture, it was the evolution of belief, the belief that humanity could create order within a world that is forever changing. Perhaps that is why, whenever a city disappears, what moves us most is not simply the sight of broken stones. It is the feeling that a part of humanity's dream has disappeared with it. Tonight, we will enter the world of such cities together. But before we descend beneath the sea, take a quiet moment to imagine. Imagine yourself standing on the deck of a small boat upon a calm and peaceful sea. The breeze is gentle. The sky is filled with stars. The water is almost perfectly still. When you look down, you see nothing except an endless expanse of deep blue. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggests an entire city once flourished directly beneath your feet. No one hears the temple bells anymore. No one sees the crowded marketplaces. No children run along the stone-paved streets. There is only water, silence, and time. There is something profoundly similar between the ocean and the human mind. Jung devoted much of his life to exploring the deepest layers of the unconscious. He believed that most of what shapes our lives does not exist upon the surface of conscious awareness. It lives somewhere much deeper, hidden, silent, like the floor of the sea. Old memories, feelings that have never been given a name, ancient symbols. They do not disappear, they simply sink beneath the surface. The ocean is much the same. When a city is swallowed by the sea, we often say that it has been lost. But is lost truly the right word? Or has it simply entered another state of existence? A state beyond the reach of human eyes, while history continues to hold it in quiet remembrance. Perhaps water is not always a destroyer. Sometimes it is a keeper of memories. In everyday life, when a house is abandoned upon the land, the wind slowly rots its roof. Rain wears away its walls. People carry off its bricks, one by one. Trees push their roots through its foundation. With time, very little remains. Yet beneath the water, everything unfolds differently. Soft layers of silt gently blanket the streets. Walls are gradually embraced by sand. Artifacts lie peacefully within the darkness. There is no sunlight, very little oxygen, very few people. In its own mysterious way, the ocean both conceals and protects. There are places where, after thousands of years, archaeologists have uncovered stone stairways that remain almost perfectly intact. Clay vessels still rest exactly where their final owners placed them. Anchors still wait quietly within ancient harbors, as though life had paused only yesterday. And that invites a profound question. If a city no longer has inhabitants, has it truly died? Or is it simply asleep? Perhaps this is why humanity has always been drawn to sunken cities. They are unlike ruins that stand upon mountain peaks. Unlike abandoned castles left to weather beneath the sky, they lie hidden beneath a veil of water. Every meter of depth feels like another layer of time. To reach them, we must descend. Just as, to understand ourselves, we must descend into the deeper layers of the mind. Jung called this journey the descent into the unconscious. It is not a journey made to escape the world. It is a journey made to rediscover what once seemed lost. The ocean offers us a remarkably similar path. Each time a team of archaeologists lowers a camera toward the seabed, it feels as though a doorway into humanity's memory is slowly opening. No one knows what waits below. A road? A statue? A temple? Or merely lifeless stones? Yet it is precisely that uncertainty that makes every discovery so extraordinary. For centuries, countless stories of sunken cities were dismissed as legends. People spoke of vanished harbors, palaces swallowed beneath the waves, entire civilizations consumed by water in a single night. At first, such stories sounded like fairy tales, until modern archaeology began revealing that some of those legends contained remarkable truths. And that is when history became even more fascinating than imagination, because beneath the sea lies more than nature alone. There are also the footprints of humanity. Places where, thousands of years ago, the sound of builders' hammers once echoed, where the splash of oars announced arriving boats, where children laughed and played, where prayers rose into the air, where merchants bargained in lively marketplaces. Today, every one of those sounds has faded away. Yet the silence of the ocean does not mean that memory has disappeared. It is simply waiting to be heard in another way. And perhaps that is what gives history its deepest beauty. History does not live only within books. It also rests beneath layers of sand, upon the ocean floor, in places we would least expect. The more we explore, the more we realize that the Earth is not an unchanging stage. It is always moving, always changing, quietly rewriting itself. And sunken cities stand among the clearest witnesses to that truth. But if these cities were once so powerful, what caused them to disappear? What could cause an entire civilization with its homes, its harbors, and its temples to slowly, or suddenly, vanish beneath the water? That is the story we will explore in the next chapter, where history meets geology, and where the quiet movements of the earth determine the fate of an entire city. If there is one lesson history has always whispered to humanity, it is this: nature has never known the names we give ourselves. It does not know which place is a small village, which is a mighty empire, which is the capital of a king, or which stands at the heart of an entire civilization. To the ocean, they are all simply layers of earth and stone resting upon a planet that never stops moving. At first, that may sound cold, yet perhaps that is precisely what makes it so fair. An earthquake does not choose where it will pass. A tsunami does not stop before magnificent city walls. The rising sea does not slow because people pray. Nature carries no malice. It simply continues the work it has carried out for billions of years. And sometimes, that work quietly brings one chapter of human history to its close. It is remarkable to realize that throughout most of our history, human beings have sought to conquer nature. We dug canals, built dikes, constructed harbors, reclaimed land from the sea, raised cities along the very edge of the water. Because the sea offered so many precious gifts, trade routes, abundant fisheries, gateways to distant civilizations, most of the wealthiest cities in history stood beside the sea. Alexandria, Thonis Heracleion, Venice, Constantinople, Port Royal, Baiae, and countless other ancient ports. Humanity has always been drawn toward the ocean, yet it is there that the boundary between existence and disappearance becomes most fragile. Carl Gustav Jung devoted much of his life to studying the symbols that appear within human dreams. Across many cultures, water has always carried a profound meaning. It is both the place where life begins and the realm of the unknown. a symbol of the unconscious, the hidden world beneath the conscious awareness we experience every day. In dreams, deep water often represents layers of memory and emotion that remain unexplored. Perhaps that is why the real ocean awakens such similar feelings within us. We know so much about the world's surface, yet everything beneath the water continues to stir our imagination. Every sunken city is like a shared memory of humanity, no longer visible before our eyes, yet still present, quietly, patiently, waiting for someone to find it. It is a beautiful thought, because it reminds us that history does not always disappear. Sometimes, history is simply asleep, sleeping beneath layers of sand, sleeping beneath soft mud, sleeping beneath cold water, waiting for another age to awaken it. Perhaps that is why archaeologists often say they are not searching for treasure, they are searching for stories. A clay vessel is not precious because it is made of earth. A statue is not precious because it is carved from stone. Its true value lies in the life of the person who once touched it. A single footprint preserved in ancient ground can tell more than an entire book. A small kitchen resting beneath the sea can help us imagine the final meal shared by a family 3,000 years ago. An anchor, still resting in its original place, can reveal an entire network of trade that once connected distant lands. Sunken cities make history feel deeply personal. They remind us that the people who lived there were never merely dry names in textbooks. They, too, woke each morning, prepared meals, loved those around them, carried worries, hoped for a brighter tomorrow. They never imagined that, thousands of years later, their entire city would rest upon the floor of the sea. Perhaps what allows us to feel such empathy for them is how deeply alike we truly are. Even though thousands of years separate our lives, human beings have always carried remarkably similar dreams: to build a home, to raise children, to live in peace, to believe that tomorrow will arrive just as today has. Yet history teaches us a deeply humbling lesson. Nothing is permanent. No coastline endures forever. No city is completely immune to the passage of time. And perhaps it is precisely this fragility that makes life so precious. Jung believed that true maturity begins when we learn to embrace change instead of trying to control everything. The same is true of civilizations. The civilizations that endure the longest are not those that have never faced nature's power. They are the ones that understand they are only a small part of the Earth's vast and ever-flowing story. When we look upon sunken cities, we should not see only loss. For if there were nothing but loss, no one would ever return to explore them. What draws archaeologists back beneath the sea year after year is not sorrow, it is hope. The hope that beneath those layers of sand, another untold story still waits. The hope that every new discovery may help us understand ourselves a little more deeply. Because in the end, history is never only about the past. History continually illuminates the present. Every sunken city is like a mirror. Within it, we see civilizations that have vanished. Yet at the same time, we see the modern cities rising along today's coastlines, towering skyscrapers, bustling harbors, people who still believe they can master nature. Perhaps, thousands of years from now, future generations will look back upon us with the very same curiosity. They may ask, how did the people of the 21st century live? What did they build? What did they believe? And did they ever imagine that their own cities, too, might one day disappear? That is the quiet question every sunken city continues to ask. Not to fill us with fear, but to remind us to live more humbly before nature, to cherish more deeply the places we call home, and to remember that what endures longest is not walls of stone, but the stories human beings leave behind. As the night grows quieter still, allow your thoughts to drift upon the gentle waves, as though you were slowly descending into the clear waters of the past. Far below lie not only cities that have slept for thousands of years, there is also history's quiet invitation, an invitation to journey deeper into the heart of the earth, and discover what truly caused those cities to disappear. And that will be our path in the next chapter, where the unseen movements of geology, violent earthquakes, and the slow rise of the sea reveal how nature can reshape the destiny of an entire civilization. If, in the previous chapter, we quietly descended into the depths of the ocean to meet the cities that have slept for thousands of years, then tonight we will ask an even deeper question. What truly caused them to disappear? At first glance, the answer seems simple: an earthquake, a tsunami, rising seas, or the shifting of the Earth's crust. Yet the more closely we study history, the more we realize that nature rarely works in simple ways. A city does not vanish because of a single earthquake alone. It disappears through millions of years of silent movements beneath the earth. A coastline does not sink because of one heavy rainstorm. It sinks because geological changes unfold so slowly that entire generations pass without noticing them. That thought reminds me of something Carl Gustav Jung once wrote. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. No awakening comes without passing through suffering. Perhaps the earth moves through similar cycles. The greatest transformations often begin with the smallest movements. Movements so subtle that almost no one notices them, until one day, everything has changed. When we stand upon solid ground, it is easy to believe that the earth beneath our feet is permanent. The rocks seem unmoving. The mountains appear eternal. The shoreline seems as though it has always been there. Yet beneath those layers of stone, the earth has never truly been still. Vast tectonic plates continue to shift, centimeter by centimeter, every year. Molten magma moves silently deep within the planet. Layers of sediment slowly sink beneath their own weight. A human life spans only a few decades. Geology measures time in thousands, even millions, of years. Because of that, we often mistake slowness for stillness. Perhaps that is one of humanity's greatest illusions, not only in nature, but within life itself. Jung believed that the most important transformations of the soul happen quietly. A person does not truly change overnight. Transformation begins with the smallest emotions, the smallest questions, the tiniest cracks in the way we see the world, until one day, our entire life has turned in another direction. Cities are much the same. Long before they sink beneath the sea, they often carry signs that almost no one notices. The sea often arrives in silence, so quietly that many people never realize they are living through the final years of their homeland. Perhaps that is the most unsettling power of time. Its greatest transformations unfold so slowly that we gradually learn to accept them as ordinary. Imagine a child born in a small village by the sea. During the first year of that child's life, the shoreline lies hundreds of meters away from home. 10 years later, the sandy beach has grown just a little smaller. 20 years later, unusually high tides begin creeping onto the lower roads. 30 years later, a few families quietly move away. 40 years later, the seaside temple must build a protective seawall. 50 years later, the harbor can no longer function as it once did. And then, one day, when that child's grandchild stands before the sea, the place that was once the village square lies beneath the water. There is no single moment that can be called the day the city died. There are only thousands of ordinary days, each one losing just a little, until, eventually, everything is gone. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." Perhaps those who lived along the coast thousands of years ago experienced something very much like this. They could not stop the ocean. They could only adapt. They built higher dikes, raised their homes, moved their harbors, retreated one small step at a time, until there was nowhere left to retreat. Interestingly, most ancient cities were not built beside the sea by accident. Human beings have always chosen places where land and water meet. There were fish, trade, ships carrying goods, ideas, and cultures from distant lands. The sea created prosperity, yet centuries or even millennia later, that very same sea became the reason those cities disappeared. There is a quiet paradox within that truth. The very thing that nourishes life can also bring it to an end, like a river that waters fertile fields, yet sometimes causes devastating floods, like fire that warms a family, yet can consume an entire forest. Nature has no desire to reward or punish. It simply follows its own laws. In Jungian psychology, water has always held a special meaning. Jung regarded deep water as an image of the unconscious, the place where memories, emotions, and unrealized potential quietly reside. When a city sinks beneath the sea, that image seems to gain another layer of meaning. It is not merely a piece of land that disappears. The memory of an entire community slowly descends into the deeper layers of history. Yet, not every change comes from the sea. Sometimes, it is the land itself that quietly moves away from humanity. We often think of solid ground as the most stable thing we know. Yet to a geologist, the Earth's surface resembles a living body breathing with extraordinary slowness. Some regions sink only a few millimeters each year. Such a distance is too small for any person to notice. But if that process continues for thousands of years, the result becomes extraordinary. A harbor that once stood on dry land becomes part of the seabed. A lively public square disappears beneath layers of sediment. A neighborhood once filled with people becomes a place where fish swim peacefully each day. In many parts of the world, land subsidence occurs because soft sediment gradually compresses beneath its own weight. Elsewhere, tectonic activity slowly lowers entire coastlines. Some regions are shaped by volcanic forces. Strange as it may sound, volcanoes do far more than create mountains. They can also cause the land to rise and fall in cycles that last for centuries. One remarkable example is Baiae in southern Italy. Today, magnificent Roman villas, public bathhouses, and breathtaking mosaic floors lie beneath the sea. Not because of a single catastrophic flood, but because of a geological process known as bradisism, the extraordinarily slow rising and sinking of the Earth's surface caused by the movement of magma deep below. What is truly astonishing is that throughout this process, the ancient inhabitants may have noticed very little. They never watched their city disappear all at once. They simply noticed that the harbor seemed a little closer to the water each year, that the tides reached a little farther inland, changes too small to inspire fear, yet large enough to reshape history itself. It reminds us of something deeply familiar in our own lives. Not every turning point arrives like thunder. Some transformations begin with the smallest things: a habit, a decision, a delay, a warning quietly ignored. Day after day, they accumulate. Until one day, looking back, we realize we have traveled very far from where we once began. Perhaps civilizations resemble human beings in this way. They rarely disappear because of a single cause: earthquakes, rising seas, gradual land subsidence, changing river mouths, volcanic activity, all weave together into a vast symphony that nature began composing long before humanity appeared. We are simply brief participants who enter that music for a little while. This is not a pessimistic story, quite the opposite. It invites us to look upon history with greater compassion. Sunken cities did not fail because their people lacked wisdom. They observed the skies. They built seawalls. They searched for ways to adapt. Yet some forces lie beyond the reach of every civilization. That is why, whenever archaeologists discover an ancient road resting upon the ocean floor, they have found far more than carefully laid stones. They have uncovered the courage of people who once struggled to build meaningful lives upon a planet that has never ceased moving. Perhaps that is the gentlest lesson this chapter offers us. Human beings never truly own the land beneath their feet. We merely live upon a temporary gift of stability that nature allows us to borrow. Today's coastline may not be the coastline of 1,000 years from now, and our modern cities, too, will one day become history to a distant future. Yet before those cities vanished completely from humanity's memory, the ocean quietly became their guardian. Beneath those deep blue waters, streets, temples, harbors, and public squares continue to wait, no longer as distant legends, but as living evidence of a world that truly existed. And it is these extraordinary discoveries that lead us into the next chapter, where underwater archaeology reveals that beneath the sea lie not only lifeless rocks, but remarkably preserved cities, still telling the story of history in the quietest way imaginable. There is a moment that almost every underwater archaeologist describes with the very same emotion. It is not the moment they discover gold, not when they uncover a priceless statue, nor even when they recover an artifact of extraordinary value. The moment that leaves them speechless usually comes much earlier. It is the instant when the lights of the submersible slowly sweep through the deep blue water, and before them appears a road, not a path shaped by nature, but a carefully paved stone street, perfectly straight, with defined edges, with stones that human hands placed there thousands of years ago. For the first few seconds, the feeling is almost impossible to describe. Because the human mind is not accustomed to seeing a street lying upon the ocean floor, roads belong to the land, to footsteps, to everyday life. When we see one beneath the sea, it feels as though two worlds that were never meant to meet have somehow become one. That is the moment when history no longer lives upon the pages of a book. It stands before our eyes, silent, intact, deeply moving. Perhaps that is why underwater archaeology possesses a beauty unlike any other. A city buried beneath the desert still rests beneath the open sky. A temple hidden deep within the forest still greets the sunlight each day. But a city resting upon the ocean floor seems to be sleeping within another world. Very little light reaches it. Almost every sound has disappeared. Even time itself seems to move more slowly there. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." The quotation is often understood as an invitation to explore the inner self. Yet, in another way, it also brings to mind the journey of archaeology. For descending to the ocean floor is much like entering the unconscious of the earth. We are not searching for something new. We are searching for things that once existed but have been hidden by time. Like the deepest memories within the human mind, they have not disappeared. They are simply waiting to be remembered. What is truly remarkable is that the deeper archaeologists descend, the more they realize they are not standing before meaningless piles of stone. They are standing within real cities, cities that once had careful planning, laws, people who lived, loved, worked, and dreamed. One street leads to a public square. The square opens into residential neighborhoods. The neighborhoods connect to the harbor. Everything follows an order, much like any modern city, with one profound difference. No one walks those streets anymore. Imagine yourself swimming slowly along an ancient avenue. On either side lie the stone foundations of long-forgotten homes. At one corner, a flight of steps remains almost untouched. A little farther on rests the foundation of what was once a marketplace. The paving stones still lie exactly where skilled builders placed them 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. The underwater world is utterly still. There are no wagon wheels, no conversations drifting through the air, no children laughing as they run along the streets. Yet it is precisely that silence that awakens the imagination more powerfully than ever, because we know this place was once filled with life. Every stone was once touched by human hands. Every doorway was opened each morning. Every corner witnessed ordinary meetings between ordinary people. History is often told through the names of kings, battles, empires, but archaeology tells another story. It tells the story of everyday lives: a small kitchen, a water jar, a packed earth floor, a simple grinding stone. These things rarely appear in epic tales, yet they help us understand the past more truthfully than any heroic legend ever could. Jung believed that what shapes human nature is not only extraordinary moments, it is also the ordinary experiences repeated day after day. A civilization is much the same. The soul of a city is not found only within its palaces. It lives along the streets where the baker passed each morning, at the village well where neighbors gathered, in the corner of the marketplace where children grew up. Perhaps that is why, when archaeologists uncover an underwater neighborhood, they do not feel they have discovered a ruin. Instead, they feel as though they have stepped into a life that has simply been paused. In some places, the houses are still clearly divided into individual rooms, bedrooms, storage rooms, inner courtyards. Even traces of ancient hearths remain. Everything creates the uncanny feeling that the owners stepped away only a few hours ago. In many excavations, archaeologists have found objects resting exactly where they were last used. A clay jar beside a kitchen floor, an anchor still waiting in its harbor, a fallen doorway leaning gently across an entrance. These tiny details possess extraordinary power. They transform history from an abstraction into life itself. It is at moments like these that we begin to understand that sunken cities are not myths. They are not Atlantis imagined by storytellers, nor legends embellished through countless generations. They were real cities, with real urban planning, real inhabitants, real joys, real sorrows, places where ordinary days unfolded, until nature suddenly brought them to an end. Perhaps the greatest beauty of underwater archaeology is not the discovery of statues or treasure. It is giving back a name to people who were once forgotten. Every road that is uncovered quietly declares, someone once walked here. Every house brought back into the light gently reminds us, a family once lived here. Every public square emerging from beneath the mud bears witness to gatherings, marketplaces, celebrations, and everyday moments. Through discoveries like these, history slowly crosses the threshold from legend into truth. Yet streets and houses are only the beginning, for as archaeologists journey deeper into cities sleeping beneath the sea, they encounter places that are even more sacred. Temples where people once entrusted their deepest hopes, harbors that connected distant civilizations, and burial grounds where the final inhabitants still rest peacefully beneath the ocean. When the first streets and homes emerge through the deep blue water, archaeologists realize they are not merely standing before an ancient settlement, they are standing before a complete world. A city cannot exist through houses alone. It needs places where people gather, trade, pray, remember those who have passed away. It is in these places that the soul of a civilization reveals itself most clearly. Among the structures most often discovered beneath the sea are temples. This never surprises archaeologists. From humanity's earliest days, nearly every city was built around a sacred place, perhaps a temple dedicated to the god of the sea, the sun, fertility, or the guardian deity of the city itself. A temple was never merely a place for ritual. It was the spiritual heart of the community, the place where people entrusted the questions that reason alone could never answer. Carl Gustav Jung devoted many years to studying the symbolism of temples throughout human history. He believed that people in every culture possess a natural desire to create sacred spaces through which they may connect with something greater than themselves. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Perhaps ancient temples formed part of that lifelong journey. They reflect humanity's quiet search for meaning within a world filled with uncertainty. What is remarkable is that, despite resting beneath the sea for thousands of years, many temples still preserve their original design. Their columns continue to stand. Stone steps still lead toward the inner sanctuary. Statues, though covered with marine life, retain their solemn dignity. The sea has carried away the voices of prayer, but it has never taken away the sacred stillness of these places. When the lights of a research submersible sweep across columns covered in coral, time itself seems to pause, not because history has died, But because history is asleep, beside the temples lie the public squares. If the temple was the spiritual heart of the city, the square was its daily heartbeat. This was where merchants opened their stalls at dawn, where farmers arrived carrying their harvests, where orators addressed the crowd, where children played, where festivals filled the seasons with celebration. A public square was never built only from stone. It was built from meetings, greetings, farewells, laughter, and tears. Today, when we look upon a square resting beneath the sea, no voices remain. Yet its silence somehow gives a voice to imagination. Perhaps it was here that two people first met and fell in love. Perhaps it was here that a father once walked hand in hand with his young son on an ordinary morning. History's greatest stories are always woven from countless ordinary moments such as these. And then there were the harbors. Perhaps nowhere reveals the character of a city more clearly than its harbor. A harbor was the city's first greeting to the world. It was here that ships arrived carrying goods, spices, silk, metals, wine, precious timber. Yet they also carried something far more enduring: ideas, languages, beliefs, cultures. Without trade, many civilizations would never have developed into the societies we know today. That is why, when archaeologists discover anchors still resting in their original positions, stone piers stretching quietly into the sea, or warehouses standing beside the ancient shoreline, they are uncovering far more than architecture. They are reading the network that once connected an entire ancient world. Each anchor is like a point upon the map of commerce. Each harbor tells the story of people who crossed the sea in search of a better life. It reminds us that those who lived thousands of years ago were not so different from ourselves. They too were curious about distant lands. They longed to connect with others. They hoped that each voyage might open the door to a brighter future. And then, after all of that, come the burial grounds. Perhaps they are the quietest places in any city. An ancient cemetery resting beneath the sea carries a feeling unlike any other. Here, there is none of the bustle of the marketplace, none of the sounds that once filled the harbor, only peace. Ancient graves reveal an astonishing amount to archaeology: how people laid their loved ones to rest, what they believed awaited them after death, which possessions they chose to accompany them on their final journey. From these seemingly small details, an entire system of belief slowly emerges. Jung believed that the way people understand death always reflects the way they understand life. A civilization is not defined only by what it builds, it is also revealed by how it remembers those who have gone before. Perhaps that is why underwater burial sites are approached with such profound respect. For every artifact found, there is more than an ancient object. It once belonged to a human being, a life, a family, a story that time has gently fallen silent around. This is also what separates underwater archaeology from treasure hunting. The greatest value does not lie in the object itself. It lies in where it was found. A clay vessel resting inside a kitchen tells an entirely different story from one displayed in a museum with no knowledge of where it came from. A single coin lying upon the road leading to a harbor carries a different meaning from a coin sold in an antique market. Archaeology strives to preserve every artifact within its original context, because, much like human memory, once something is separated from the place that gave it meaning, that meaning slowly begins to fade. Perhaps that is the greatest gift sunken cities offer us. They prove that beneath waters, which seem to hold only sand and coral, entire chapters of history still remain intact. Not myths told beside a fire, not legends embroidered through generations, but real cities, real people, real lives once lived. And as the light of science gradually reaches the deepest parts of the ocean, more and more of those cities awaken from a sleep that has lasted for thousands of years. In the next chapter, we will visit some of the most remarkable among them, from Pavlopetri in Greece, Thonis Heracleion in Egypt, Baiae in ancient Rome, Port Royal in Jamaica, to Lion City in China and listen to the unique stories. Each one continues to whisper beneath the deep blue sea. If every sunken city is a book, then the ocean is surely the greatest library humanity has never finished reading. For thousands of years, the sea has quietly concealed ancient streets, bustling harbors, and temples that once glowed beneath the sunlight. No one knows exactly how many cities still sleep beneath those blue waters. Each time modern technology allows us to descend farther into the depths, it feels as though we are turning another page in a memory the Earth has guarded for far too long. What makes these cities so extraordinary is that each tells a different story. Some were swallowed by earthquakes within minutes. Some slowly disappeared over many centuries. Some vanished beneath rising seas. Others survived only as legends until archaeology proved that they had truly existed. It is this remarkable diversity that makes every underwater expedition feel like a journey through time itself. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Perhaps history works in much the same way. Every sunken city tells us more than the story of the past. It also reflects how we choose to see the present. And among all the underwater cities humanity has ever discovered, there is one place so extraordinary that many archaeologists call it the gateway to the earliest history of urban civilization. Its name is Pavlopetri. Resting beneath the crystal-clear waters off the southern coast of Greece, Pavlopetri possesses a beauty unlike the famous ruins that stand upon dry land. There are no towering columns like those of the Acropolis, no vast amphitheaters like the Colosseum, no soaring pyramids. Here, beauty is found in ordinary things. A small city, narrow streets, simple houses, courtyards, neighborhoods laid out with remarkable order. And it is precisely that ordinary character that makes the place extraordinary. For Pavlopetri flourished during the Bronze Age more than 3,000 years ago. It is one of the oldest submerged cities ever confirmed by archaeology. When researchers first mapped the seabed, they were astonished. The streets followed a clear plan. Residential districts were carefully organized. There were public squares, road networks, evidence of thriving trade. All of this demonstrates that, even in humanity's earliest centuries, people already understood the principles of urban planning. It is remarkable to imagine that while many regions of the world were still made up of scattered villages, a community here had already created a fully organized city. Pavlopetri transforms the way we see our ancestors. They did more than survive. They organized society. They cooperated. They created shared spaces where people could live together. Perhaps this is what Jung meant when he suggested that humanity's capacity to create order lies deep within our nature. A city is more than a place to live. It is the physical expression of our longing to live together. Leaving the waters of Greece behind, our journey carries us to the mouth of the Nile, where there once stood a city that, for centuries, many believed existed only in legend. Its name was Thonis Heracleion. Today, beneath the Mediterranean waters off the coast of Egypt, archaeologists can see colossal statues lying peacefully in the sand. Granite columns, ancient docks, massive anchors, coins, clay vessels. Together, they tell the story of a city that once flourished beyond imagination. Before Alexandria was founded, Thonis Heracleion served as Egypt's most important gateway to the outside world. Every ship sailing from the Mediterranean toward the land of the pharaohs passed through this remarkable port. It was far more than a center of commerce. It was also a great center of religious life. Magnificent temples honored the god Amun. Merchants from Greece, Phoenicia, and countless other lands gathered there. It is difficult to imagine that the people of this city ever believed it could one day disappear beneath the sea. What makes the story of Thonis Heracleion so extraordinary is not only its grandeur, it is that history itself once forgot it. For centuries, scholars knew its name only from ancient writings. No one knew where the city truly lay. Some believed it was nothing more than myth. Others thought the old texts had exaggerated its importance. Then, near the end of the 20th century, underwater surveys uncovered immense remains resting upon the seabed. Artifact after artifact was raised. Street after street was carefully mapped. Statue after statue was identified, and history finally returned a forgotten city to the memory of humankind. There is something profoundly moving about that moment. A place that had been forgotten for thousands of years was finally remembered once more. It reminds us of the human mind itself. Sometimes, our most important memories do not disappear. They simply rest in the deepest places, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Jung called this the journey into the unconscious, a process of rediscovering the parts of ourselves we once believed were lost. The ocean did something remarkably similar with Thonis Heracleion. It did not erase the city. It simply kept it safe for a very long time. Not far from Thonis Heracleion lay another ancient city, Canopus. Today, its name is far less familiar. Yet in the ancient world, Canopus was an important city within the great Nile Delta. It ultimately shared the same fate as its neighboring port: weak ground, centuries of gradual subsidence, silent geological movements, until, at last, the sea slowly covered everything. What fascinated archaeologists, as they studied both Thonis Heracleion and Canopus, was the realization that it was not merely one city that had disappeared. An entire urban landscape had gradually slipped beneath the sea, like an enormous piece of history hidden beneath the ocean. From discoveries such as these, we begin to understand that nature does not merely alter the destiny of individual cities, it can reshape the map of an entire civilization. And as our journey continues along the Egyptian coast, we arrive at a name even more famous. A city that once possessed a lighthouse, counted among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A center of learning where hundreds of thousands of scrolls were once preserved. A symbol of power overlooking the Mediterranean. Alexandria. If Pavlopetri tells the story of the dawn of urban civilization, and Thonis Heracleion and Canopus speak of Egypt's golden age upon the Mediterranean, then our next destination feels like a chapter written with both power and knowledge. Alexandria. In the imagination of many people, Alexandria will forever be linked with the Lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the legendary Library of Alexandria, where the knowledge of the known world was once gathered. Yet few realize that beneath the waters just offshore, important parts of that magnificent city still remain. Enormous blocks of granite, the foundations of the royal harbor, and statues of pharaohs and queens, still resting beneath the sea. There, ships arrived carrying cargo, spices, silk, metals, wine, precious timber, but they carried something else as well: ideas, languages, beliefs, cultures. Without trade, many civilizations would never have grown into the societies we know today. That is why, when archaeologists discover anchors still resting in their original positions, stone piers extending quietly into the sea, or warehouses standing along the ancient shoreline, they are uncovering far more than architectural remains. They are reading the network that once connected an entire ancient world. Each anchor is like a single point upon the map of commerce. Each harbor tells the story of people who crossed the sea in search of a better life. It reminds us that those who lived thousands of years ago were not so different from ourselves. They, too, were curious about distant lands. They longed to meet unfamiliar people. They hoped that every voyage might lead to a brighter tomorrow. And then, at the end of every city, there were the cemeteries. Perhaps they were the quietest places of all. An ancient burial ground beneath the sea carries a feeling unlike any other. There is none of the bustle of the marketplace, none of the constant movement of the harbor, only peace. Ancient graves reveal remarkable things to archaeology: how people buried those they loved, what they believed awaited them after death, which belongings they chose to accompany them on their final journey. From details that appear so small, an entire world of belief slowly comes into view. Jung believed that the way people understand death always reflects the way they understand life. A civilization is not revealed only through what it builds. It is also revealed through the way it remembers those who have passed away. Perhaps that is why underwater cemeteries are approached with such profound reverence. Every object discovered there is more than an artifact. It once belonged to a human being, a life, a family, a story that time has quietly fallen silent around. This is what truly separates underwater archaeology from treasure hunting. The greatest value is not the object itself. It is where the object was found. A clay vessel resting inside an ancient kitchen tells an entirely different story from one displayed in a museum without any knowledge of where it came from. A single coin lying upon the road leading toward the harbor carries a very different meaning from a coin sold in an antique market. Archaeology always strives to preserve every artifact within its original context, because, just like human memory, once something is separated from the place that gave it meaning, its significance slowly begins to fade. Perhaps this is the greatest gift sunken cities offer us. They prove that beneath waters which appear to hold nothing more than sand and coral, entire chapters of history still remain astonishingly intact. Not myths whispered beside ancient fires, not legends embroidered through countless generations, but real cities, real people, real lives that once unfolded beneath the same sky we know today. And as the light of science gradually reaches deeper into the ocean, more and more of these cities awaken from a sleep that has lasted for thousands of years. In the next chapter, we will visit some of the most remarkable among them, from Pavlopetri in Greece to Heracleion in Egypt, Baiae of ancient Rome, Port Royal in Jamaica, and Lion City in China. To listen to the unique story each city continues to whisper beneath the deep blue sea. If every sunken city is a book, then the ocean is surely the greatest library humanity has never finished reading. For thousands of years, the sea has quietly covered ancient streets, bustling harbors, and temples that once shone beneath the sunlight. No one knows exactly how many cities still sleep beneath those blue waters. Each time modern technology allows us to descend farther into the depths, it feels as though we are turning another page in a memory the Earth has guarded for far too long. What makes these cities so extraordinary is that every one of them tells a different story. Some were swallowed by earthquakes within moments. Some slowly disappeared over centuries. Some vanished beneath rising seas. Others survived only as legends until archaeology proved that they had truly existed. It is this remarkable diversity that makes every underwater expedition feel like a journey through time itself. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Perhaps history works in much the same way. Every sunken city tells us more than the story of the past. It also reflects the way we choose to see the present. Among all the underwater cities humanity has discovered, one place is so extraordinary that many archaeologists describe it as the gateway to the earliest history of urban civilization. Its name is Pavlopetri. Resting beneath the crystal-clear waters off the southern coast of Greece, Pavlopetri possesses a beauty unlike the famous ruins that stand upon dry land. There are no towering columns like those of the Acropolis, no vast amphitheaters like the Colosseum, no soaring pyramids. Its beauty lies within ordinary things. A small town, narrow streets, simple homes, courtyards, neighborhoods carefully planned, and it is precisely that simplicity that makes it extraordinary. Pavlopetri flourished during the Bronze Age more than 3,000 years ago. It is one of the oldest submerged cities ever confirmed by archaeology. When researchers mapped the seabed, they were astonished. Its streets followed a carefully organized plan. Residential districts were thoughtfully arranged. There were public squares, road networks, evidence of thriving commerce. All of this demonstrates that even in humanity's earliest civilizations, people already understood the principles of urban planning. It is remarkable to imagine that while much of the world still consisted of scattered villages, a community here had already created a fully organized city. Pavlopetri changes the way we see our ancestors. They did more than survive. They organized society. They cooperated. They created shared spaces where people could live together. Perhaps this is what Jung meant when he suggested that humanity's desire to create order lies deep within our nature. A city is more than a place to live. It is the physical expression of our longing to belong together. Leaving the waters of Greece behind, our journey carries us to the mouth of the Nile, where there once stood a city that, for centuries, many believed existed only in legend. Its name was Thonis Heracleion. Today, beneath the Mediterranean waters off the coast of Egypt, archaeologists can see colossal statues lying peacefully in the sand, granite columns, ancient docks, massive anchors, coins, clay vessels. Together, they tell the story of a city that once flourished beyond imagination. Before Alexandria was founded, Thonis Heracleion served as Egypt's most important gateway to the outside world. Every vessel sailing from the Mediterranean toward the land of the pharaohs passed through this remarkable port. It was far more than a center of commerce. It was also a sacred center of worship. Great temples honored the god Amun. Merchants from Greece, Phoenicia, and many distant lands gathered there. Few could ever have imagined that one day their entire city would disappear beneath the sea. What makes the story of Thonis Heracleion so remarkable is not only its magnificence, it is that history itself once forgot it. For centuries, scholars knew its name only from ancient texts. No one knew exactly where the city had stood. Some believed it was nothing more than legend. Others thought the ancient writers had exaggerated its importance. Then, near the end of the 20th century, underwater surveys uncovered enormous remains resting upon the seabed. Artifact after artifact emerged. Street after street was carefully mapped. Statue after statue was identified. And history finally returned a forgotten city to human memory. There is something deeply moving about that moment. A place forgotten for thousands of years was remembered once again. It reminds us of the human mind itself. Sometimes our most precious memories never disappear. They simply rest in the deepest places, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Jung called this the journey into the unconscious, a gradual rediscovery of the parts of ourselves we once believed were lost. The ocean did something remarkably similar with Thonis Heracleion. It did not erase the city. It simply kept it safe for a very long time. Not far from Thonis Heracleion lay another ancient city, Canopus. Today, its name is far less familiar. Yet in the ancient world, Canopus was an important city within the Nile Delta. It ultimately shared the same fate as its neighboring port. Weak ground, centuries of gradual subsidence, silent geological movements, until, at last, the sea slowly covered everything. As archaeologists studied both Thonis Heracleion and Canopus, they realized that it was not merely one city that had disappeared. An entire urban landscape had gradually slipped beneath the sea, like an immense chapter of history quietly hidden by the ocean. From discoveries such as these, we begin to understand that nature does not simply alter the destiny of individual cities. It can reshape the map of an entire civilization. And as our journey continues along the Egyptian coast, we arrive at a name even more famous: Alexandria, a city once crowned by the lighthouse of Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a center of learning where hundreds of thousands of scrolls were preserved, a symbol of power overlooking the Mediterranean. If Pavlopetri tells the story of the dawn of urban civilization, while Thonis Heracleion and Canopus speak of Egypt's golden age upon the Mediterranean, then Alexandria represents a chapter written with both knowledge and power. In the imagination of countless people, Alexandria will forever be linked with the lighthouse of Pharos and the legendary library of Alexandria. Yet few realize that beneath the waters just offshore, important parts of that magnificent city still remain. Enormous granite blocks, the foundations of the royal harbor. statues of pharaohs and queens, columns that once supported royal palaces, all now rest peacefully beneath the sea, gently reminding us that even the greatest centers of power can never stand beyond the reach of time, not to awaken it in order to change it, but to awaken it so that we may listen. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of this entire story. The ocean did not preserve these cities out of mercy. It simply followed the quiet laws of nature. Yet those very laws, without intention, created the greatest archive of history humanity has ever known. Still, layers of silt, darkness, and the absence of oxygen are not the whole story. There is another important reason why so many underwater cities have survived in such extraordinary condition. For centuries, they remained almost untouched by human hands. There is a fascinating paradox in history. The monuments people cherish most are often the very monuments people destroy most quickly. An ancient temple standing on land may be dismantled for its stone. A statue may be shattered during war. An old neighborhood may be cleared away to make room for modern construction. Even in times of peace, time itself and human greed are often enough to reshape the past. Beneath the sea, however, everything is different. Once a city sinks deep enough, human beings can scarcely reach it. No caravans arrive. No construction sites appear. No quarries strip away its stones. No one, whether intentionally or unknowingly, removes its ancient bricks one by one. That very distance becomes an invisible shield. For centuries, underwater cities were almost forgotten. At first, that may sound tragic, yet sometimes, being forgotten is a gift. Had Port Royal remained upon dry land, many of its colonial buildings would almost certainly have been altered or demolished long ago. Had Baiae never slipped beneath the sea, its Roman villas might well have become building materials for later generations. Had Pavlopetri remained above the water, very little of the city would likely have survived after more than 3,000 years. The ocean never intended to protect them. Yet, by placing them beyond human reach, it quietly did exactly that. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Perhaps this is one of nature's hidden orders. What appears to be an ending quietly becomes the beginning of preservation. What seems lost survives in an entirely different form." As we contemplate these submerged cities, we begin to understand that time does not always destroy. More often, it simply changes the way things continue to exist. A city is no longer a place where people live, yet it becomes a living archive of memory. A road no longer echoes with footsteps, yet it preserves the traces of those who once walked there. A harbor welcomes no ships, yet it still tells us how civilizations once reached toward one another. In Jungian psychology, memory is not limited to what we consciously remember. Many of our deepest memories dwell within the unconscious. They are not present every day, yet when they awaken, they can transform the way we understand ourselves. Underwater cities resemble those memories. For thousands of years, humanity nearly forgot them. Yet the moment the light of science reaches them, they do not return as lifeless ruins. They return as storytellers. Every stone, every wall, every clay vessel, every anchor, each one carries a story patiently waiting to be heard. Perhaps the greatest wonder of archaeology is not discovering something new. It is learning how to listen to something very old. That is a skill modern humanity has, in many ways, begun to forget. We have grown accustomed to speed, to an endless stream of information, to change measured in minutes. History speaks with an entirely different rhythm. It speaks through centuries, through layers of sediment, through geological movements so slow that no single lifetime can truly perceive them. Perhaps that is why, whenever we look upon an ancient city resting beneath the sea, something within us grows quiet. Not because those structures are immense, but because they remind us that this world is infinitely larger than the brief span of any individual life. A human being lives for only a few decades. A city may endure for thousands of years. A civilization may shape countless generations yet to come, and through it all, the ocean remains, patiently witnessing everything. Some have said that the sea has no memory. Perhaps the opposite is true. The sea remembers in its own unique way. It does not write history upon paper, nor carve it into stone. It preserves history through silence. Every layer of silt is a page. Every layer of sediment is another chapter. Every submerged city is a chronicle still waiting to be fully read. And suddenly, we begin to see the ocean differently, no longer merely as a place of storms and restless waves, but as humanity's greatest library, a library with no bookshelves, no windows, no librarian, only water, darkness, and time. Jung believed that people truly mature only when they dare to descend into the deepest parts of their own souls. Perhaps civilizations mature in much the same way. To understand who we truly are, it is not enough to look only at the cities that still shine beneath the sun. We must also look toward the cities that have quietly disappeared beneath the sea. For sometimes, what has vanished helps us understand the present more clearly than what still remains. Because these cities have been preserved with such extraordinary care, humanity now has the opportunity to read once more the chapters of history that once seemed forever closed. But how do we find them within the vastness of the ocean? How do archaeologists know that beneath dozens of meters of water there lies a road, a temple, or even an entire city? The answer no longer rests in legend or luck. It lies within the remarkable technologies that have opened an entirely new age of underwater archaeology. And that will be our next journey, as sonar, underwater robots, three-dimensional scanners, and digital reconstructions begin exploring the deepest secrets of the ocean floor, where history still waits quietly to be awakened. Perhaps, if we were asked what has transformed underwater archaeology more than anything else during the past half-century, the answer would not be a famous discovery, nor a legendary expedition. It would be something far simpler. Humanity finally learned how to see what the eyes could never see. For most of history, the ocean was like a vast door that remained forever closed. People could stand upon its shores, sail across its waters, cross entire oceans in search of new lands. Yet they rarely knew what rested beneath the waves. To our ancestors, the sea was like a mirror. It reflected the sky, but never revealed the secrets hidden below. Perhaps that is why, for centuries, stories of sunken cities were dismissed as little more than legends. People spoke of temples beneath the sea, palaces swallowed by the waves, harbors that vanished overnight. Yet no one possessed the means to verify such stories. The ocean was too deep, too vast, too dark, too silent. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Perhaps those words belong not only to psychology, they also call to mind the ocean itself. For thousands of years, much of the seafloor resembled the unconscious of the earth. It had always been there, yet humanity could neither see it, nor understand it, nor reach it. Only as science advanced did those hidden depths slowly begin to emerge into the light. What is remarkable is that this journey did not begin with sophisticated submersibles. It began with a remarkably simple question. Is it possible to see through water without diving beneath it? The answer came through sound. Unlike light, sound travels through water with extraordinary efficiency. If we send a pulse of sound toward the seabed and measure the time it takes for the echo to return, we can determine the distance below. From that beautifully simple principle came one of underwater archaeology's greatest tools, sonar. The name stands for sound navigation and ranging. At first glance, sonar may seem like technology designed for submarines or naval vessels, but to archaeologists, it became the first pair of eyes capable of seeing through the veil of water. Imagine a research vessel moving slowly across the sea. Beneath its hull, pulses of sound descend continuously toward the ocean floor. When those pulses strike the seabed, they echo back, Computers record millions of those returning signals. Little by little, the map of the underwater world begins to appear. At first, only faint outlines. Then strange geometric forms emerge. A wall, a perfectly straight road, a right angle, a harbor, shapes that nature rarely creates on its own. That is the moment archaeologists begin to smile, because they know they may have discovered traces of human hands. The true wonder of sonar is that it does not actually see. It listens. It uses echoes to build an image. Perhaps there is something profoundly beautiful in that. Sometimes, to see what lies deepest, we must first learn how to listen. The same is true of the human soul. Jung never encouraged us to look only at the surface of life. He devoted his life to listening, to dreams, to symbols, to the quiet details that so many people overlook. Because sometimes, truth does not appear in brilliant light. It speaks in the softest of echoes, much like the whispers rising from the floor of the sea. But even sonar alone is not enough. Many sunken cities lie buried beneath thick layers of sediment. Stone walls, iron anchors, metal structures, completely hidden from view. Sound alone cannot always distinguish everything beneath those layers. That is where another remarkable instrument enters the story, the magnetometer. If sonar is like a pair of eyes, then a magnetometer is like a special sense capable of feeling invisible magnetic fields. Every material possesses its own unique physical properties, especially metals. An ancient iron anchor resting beneath layers of mud for thousands of years still creates tiny disturbances in the surrounding magnetic field. An old cannon, an iron gate, a shipwreck, each leaves behind an invisible fingerprint. A magnetometer does not see these things, it senses them. That is why modern underwater surveys almost always combine sonar with magnetometers. One reveals the shape of the landscape. The other helps identify what lies hidden beneath the sediment. The two technologies complement one another like the two hemispheres of the human brain. One creates the image. The other recognizes signals that the eye can never perceive. Perhaps this is how humanity has always progressed. We do not merely expand our vision. We learn to perceive what was once invisible. What is truly astonishing is that before these technologies existed, many submerged cities simply did not exist within humanity's awareness, not because they had never existed, but because they lay beyond our ability to observe them. That reminds me of one of Jung's most familiar ideas. He believed that what remains unconscious does not cease to exist. A forgotten fear continues shaping our lives. A deeply buried memory still influences our character. An ancient symbol continues to appear in our dreams. All of these things remain real, even though ordinary eyes cannot see them. Sunken cities are much the same. For thousands of years, they remained exactly where they had always been. Their streets, their temples, their public squares, their harbors. They never disappeared. Humanity simply lacked the means to find them. But technology never stops advancing. Sonar grows increasingly precise. Magnetometers become ever more sensitive. The blank spaces upon the map of the ocean slowly begin to disappear. Then another breakthrough arrives. No longer content merely to locate forgotten cities, humanity creates new eyes capable of descending into the deep itself, working where crushing water pressure allows people to remain for only a brief time. If sonar and magnetometers tell us that something remarkable lies beneath the sea, another question naturally follows. Who will go down to explore it? The ocean is not a quiet museum. Only a few dozen meters below the surface, sunlight already begins to fade. Go deeper still, and the color red disappears first, then orange, then yellow, until eventually everything is transformed into shades of deep blue and darkness. The pressure of the water increases with every meter. Hundreds of meters below the surface, the immense weight of the ocean is capable of crushing anything not specially designed to withstand it. Human beings can dive, but only for limited periods of time. and many places remain far too dangerous for divers to reach. Because of this, underwater archaeology entered an entirely new era, the age of machines that can dive. Underwater robots, known as ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, have become the extended hands of archaeologists. From aboard research vessels, scientists guide these robots through signals carried by long cables. Far below, the machines move gently among ancient streets that have slept for thousands of years. The robots themselves know nothing of wonder, nothing of emotion, yet through their high-resolution cameras, they carry the beauty of history back to us. There is something quietly poetic about that image. A machine, born in the 21st century, gliding silently across stone steps built 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Modern technology meeting the hands of Bronze Age builders, separated by millennia, yet connected through the silent witness of the sea. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Perhaps this sentence captures the true spirit of archaeology. These robots were never built to search for treasure. They were built to search for meaning. A tiny fragment of pottery resting exactly where it was left may hold far greater value than an exquisite statue removed from the story that once surrounded it. The trace of a single foundation may completely reshape our understanding of an entire civilization. After the robots capture thousands of photographs from every possible angle, another remarkable technology takes over: three-dimensional scanning. Today, archaeologists no longer simply photograph individual artifacts. They can create three-dimensional models of entire underwater cities with astonishing precision, accurate to within mere centimeters. Every stone, every stairway, every column is recorded through millions of individual data points. Powerful computers weave those points together into one enormous digital tapestry. The result is a city reconstructed almost exactly as it once existed. This has transformed archaeology in extraordinary ways. In the past, researchers needed to dive again and again to study an underwater site. Today, they can virtually walk through those cities. From the screen of a computer, they can measure the distance between houses, observe the direction of ancient streets, study the structure of harbors, all without touching a single artifact. This represents one of the greatest advances in modern archaeology, because today's goal is no longer to excavate as much as possible, it is to preserve as much as possible. Sometimes the finest way to protect an ancient city is not to move anything at all, simply to observe, simply to record, simply to listen, and then preserve everything in digital form. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful transformations of modern science. Humanity is slowly learning that discovery does not require possession. Understanding does not require ownership. We can come to know a city while allowing it to remain peacefully beneath the sea. There is a quiet humility in that realization. For centuries, archaeology was sometimes misunderstood as the effort to recover as many artifacts as possible. Today, that philosophy has changed. A clay vessel, resting exactly where its owner once placed it, possesses far greater scientific value than the same vessel displayed behind glass after losing every trace of its original setting. History does not exist only within artifacts. History exists within the relationships between them. That is why three-dimensional digital reconstructions have become so important. They preserve not merely individual objects, but the living spaces of entire civilizations. Some projects now even recreate complete cities through virtual reality. Researchers can walk through the streets of Pavlopetri, stand within the harbor of Thonis Heracleion, explore the villas of Baiae as though the sea had never risen. The remarkable thing is that technology has not made history more distant. Quite the opposite. It has brought history closer to humanity than ever before. Yet the more we see, the more we realize that submerged cities captivate us not simply because of their architecture. They matter because of the stories they tell. A harbor speaks of commerce. A temple tells the story of faith. A cemetery reveals how people understood death. A public square reflects the rhythm of everyday life. Every stone forms one piece of a much larger story. Jung believed that people come to understand themselves through the symbols they leave behind. Civilizations are no different. They leave behind more than buildings. They leave behind ways of living, ways of loving, ways of trading, ways of praying, ways of remembering those who came before them. These are the true treasures resting beneath the sea. Perhaps modern technology is not the central character of this story. It is simply the key. The true treasure has always been the door that key unlocks. Behind that door lie thousands of years of history waiting patiently to be told, not through tales of kings, nor through stories of great battles, but through the lives of ordinary people, people who once walked those streets, who once moored their boats in those harbors, who once offered their prayers within those temples. And it is through these humble traces that we now step into the next chapter of our journey. There, the sunken cities will no longer appear merely as ancient structures of stone. They will become living books, telling us stories of commerce, faith, daily life, and the ways in which ancient civilizations understood the world around them. There is a fascinating difference between an antique collector and an archaeologist. One may admire a clay vessel because of its beauty or its age. The other asks an entirely different question. Where did this vessel once stand? Who was the person who held it? Was it used to carry water, wine, or grain? Why was it found in that exact place? It is questions like these that transform an artifact into a story. And through those stories, an entire civilization slowly comes into view. After so many chapters spent descending beneath the sea together, exploring cities that have slept for thousands of years, perhaps we have finally arrived at the most important question of all. What are these cities trying to tell us? If we see only stone walls, ancient streets, or weathered harbors, then we are seeing only architecture. But if we learn how to listen, we begin to realize that every stone is speaking about people, not merely about kings, not only about wars, but about merchants, sailors, mothers, children, craftsmen, pilgrims, ordinary people whose quiet lives became the soul of a city. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." Perhaps history works in much the same way. To understand ancient civilizations, we should not look only at their moments of greatness. We must also understand the ordinary rhythm of their everyday lives, because it is those small moments that reveal the truest nature of humanity. One of the first stories these submerged cities reveal is the story of trade. If you study a map of the ancient world, one pattern quickly becomes clear. Most great cities faced the sea. That was no coincidence. The sea was more than a source of food. It was a road. Before airplanes, before railways, before trucks, the sea formed humanity's greatest transportation network. Every ship entering a harbor carried more than cargo. It carried languages, customs, ideas, beliefs, and dreams. When archaeologists discover an ancient harbor beneath the sea, they are not simply looking at a few stone steps descending into the water. They are looking at the gateway to an entire civilization. At Pavlopetri, the remains of ancient piers reveal that the city served as an important trading center even during the Bronze Age. At Thonis Heracleion, enormous anchors and carefully designed harbor systems demonstrate that the city once stood at the heart of trade between Egypt and the entire Mediterranean world. At Port Royal, warehouses and docks tell the story of one of the busiest ports in the Caribbean. Every harbor resembles a doorway, not merely opening toward the sea, but opening toward the world itself. Perhaps this reflects something deeply rooted within human nature. Jung believed that every person carries within them a longing to explore the unknown. That is why symbols of the journey appear throughout nearly every culture. The ship, the river, the sea, the road. Each represents transformation. Ancient ships carried more than merchandise. They carried hope. A merchant setting sail hoped for more than profitable trade. He hoped to discover something better beyond the horizon. A sailor crossed the sea not only to earn a living, he crossed it to discover the limits of himself. Perhaps that is why ancient anchors found beneath the sea carry such a remarkable feeling. An anchor appears to be nothing more than a heavy piece of iron. Yet to archaeology, it proves that ships once arrived here, that someone once waited upon this shore, that voyages once began, that departures and joyful reunions once filled these harbors. An anchor does not hold a ship forever. It holds it only long enough for the next voyage to begin. There is something profoundly beautiful in that image. Human beings always need a place to return to. Yet we also need a horizon toward which we can continue sailing. Then there are the goods themselves. Today, when archaeologists excavate submerged cities, they often discover artifacts originating from lands far beyond the city itself. Greek pottery, Roman glass, Egyptian coins, Eastern spices, amphorae, once used to transport wine and olive oil. Every object tells the story of a long journey across the sea. Together, they reveal that the ancient world was never as isolated as we once imagined. Civilizations were connected from a very early age, not only through war, but through trade. And in many ways, trade became humanity's first language of cooperation. People exchanged goods, but they also exchanged knowledge, shipbuilding techniques, agricultural methods, myths, songs, writing systems. No exchange ever remained purely material. That is what made port cities meeting places for many worlds. Perhaps this is why, when we gaze upon submerged cities, we see more than the history of individual nations. We see the history of connection itself, an invisible network linking people together long before the existence of the internet, satellites, or airplanes. And the more we understand that, the more we realize that civilization was never built through isolation. It grew through encounters, through journeys, through the simple curiosity to discover what lay beyond the horizon. Yet trade tells only part of the story. For after people gathered to exchange goods, they also gathered to share something far deeper: faith, the longing to find meaning. If harbors reveal how humanity connected with the world, then temples reveal how humanity connected with the unseen. In nearly every ancient city beneath the sea, whether Pavlopetri in Greece, Thonis Heracleion in Egypt, or Baiae in ancient Rome, archaeologists have uncovered traces of sacred spaces. Sometimes a modest temple at the city's center, a stone statue of a deity, an altar, or even an entire pilgrimage complex that once welcomed thousands of travelers from distant lands. These discoveries remind us that from humanity's earliest days, people never lived by food and shelter alone. They always longed for something greater than ordinary existence. A place where hope could be entrusted, a place to pray when the harvest failed, a place to give thanks when the sea remained calm and loved ones returned safely home, a place to believe that within the vastness of the universe, their own lives still held meaning. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." Perhaps this is one of his simplest and deepest observations, because when we look upon these submerged cities, we realize that the first thing people built was not merely houses, they built belief. A temple is far more than architecture. It is the spiritual heart of an entire community. There, strangers could stand side by side, not to bargain, not to compete, but to turn together towards something greater than themselves. Perhaps that is why the statues of ancient gods resting beneath the sea possess such quiet beauty. Many have lost their arms. Some no longer have faces. Others are covered with coral and drifting seaweed. Yet even in their brokenness, they radiate an unexpected peace. The sea has worn away the stone, but it has never worn away the faith people once entrusted to it. And through that, we begin to understand that religion, in its broadest sense, is more than ritual. It is humanity's longing to find meaning, the desire to connect with something that reaches beyond the limits of a single human life. Jung devoted much of his life to studying the religious symbols shared across human cultures. He discovered that despite differences in language and tradition, people everywhere created remarkably similar images: light, water, the tree of life, the mountain, the journey, death, and rebirth. He called these archetypes the universal patterns that dwell within the collective unconscious. Perhaps that is why, when we stand before an ancient temple beneath the sea, it still feels strangely familiar. Not because we all share the same religion, but because we all share the same human nature. Beyond the temples came the pilgrimage sites. At Thonis Heracleion, archaeological evidence suggests that countless worshippers once traveled there to participate in ceremonies honoring the god Amun. That tells us these ancient cities were more than centers of commerce. They were also places where people sought healing for the soul. It is remarkable to realize that thousands of years ago, people journeyed hundreds of miles not simply to trade, but to search for peace. Perhaps that longing has never truly changed. Even today, we often travel great distances in search of places where the heart can finally rest. Only now, our modern pilgrimages sometimes lead not toward a temple, but toward the quiet sanctuary within ourselves. Leaving these sacred spaces behind, archaeology gently guides us back into the ordinary rhythms of daily life. Homes, streets, wells, marketplaces. Someone once said that if you truly wish to understand a civilization, do not begin with its palace, begin with its kitchen. In truth, many of the most important discoveries beneath the sea have come from the most ordinary places: a stone floor, a grinding mill, a hearth, a water jar. These simple things reveal how ancient people once lived, what they ate, where they slept, how they organized their families. Archaeology is not only the story of kings, it is the story of a mother preparing the evening meal, a father repairing the roof, a child running along a stone-paved street. A city is not truly built by its palaces. It is built by thousands of ordinary lives. That is also why ancient roads so often move archaeologists deeply. A road does not simply connect two places. It connects people. It is the setting for countless encounters that history never recorded. Perhaps a husband and wife first met upon that very street. Perhaps a child once ran after his father around that very corner. Perhaps an old man took the final steps of his life across those same stones. History remembers battles, but life itself is made from ordinary moments. Between those streets lay the marketplaces. If the harbor connected the city to the outside world, then the marketplace was the heart of the world within. There were voices bargaining, the aroma of freshly baked bread, seasonal fruits, storytellers, craftsmen, musicians, conversations that no one ever wrote down, yet which became the very soul of the city. Then there were the wells. At first glance, a well is simply a place to draw water, but in many ancient civilizations, it was also the center of community life. People gathered there each morning. They exchanged news, shared their joys and sorrows. Sometimes, an ancient well reveals more about a society than an entire palace. And finally, there are the cemeteries. Perhaps these are the places that leave modern people most silent. For the way a civilization says farewell to its dead always reflects the way it understands life itself. The objects buried alongside the deceased, the arrangement of each grave, the symbols carved into stone. Together they reveal what people believed awaited humanity after death. Jung believed that our attitude toward death always reflects the way we choose to live. When we look upon ancient cemeteries beneath the sea, we do not see only endings. We see hope. Hope that separation is not the final full stop. After everything the sunken cities have revealed, perhaps the greatest gift they leave us is not their priceless artifacts, but a very simple truth. The people who lived 4,000 or 5,000 years ago were not nearly as different from us as we often imagine. They loved, they worried, they traded, they prayed, they built homes, they raised children, they feared, the forces of nature, and they always hoped that tomorrow would be better than today. Perhaps it is that familiarity that makes these submerged cities so deeply moving. They do not merely tell the story of civilizations that have disappeared, they tell the story of us, of those deepest parts of the human soul that remain unchanged, even after thousands of years have passed. Yet our journey beneath the sea still leaves one irresistible question waiting ahead. How many of these stories belong to history that has been proven, and how many still rest upon the delicate boundary between legend and reality? That is where science meets imagination, where archaeology enters into conversation with ancient myths such as Atlantis, Yonaguni, and Dwarka in the next chapter. Perhaps nothing has stirred the human imagination more powerfully than the idea of a vanished city. Not a single house, not a lone ship, but an entire civilization. A place that once held streets, temples, bustling markets, the laughter of children, and lamps glowing on warm summer evenings, only to disappear from the map of the world as though it had never existed. We have always been captivated by stories like these, perhaps because, deep within the human soul, we all carry the quiet feeling that the past is still whispering somewhere, that beneath layers of sand, beneath dense forests, or beneath the still surface of the sea, there remain memories humanity has not yet finished reading. That is why, long before archaeology existed, people were already telling stories about lands swallowed by the ocean. Some tales passed from generation to generation. Some legends survived longer than entire empires. Some names still stir our imagination even today. Atlantis, Yonaguni, Dwarka. 3 names, 3 stories, 3 very different boundaries between science and legend. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Myths are original revelations of the preconscious psyche." To Jung, myths were never merely old stories. He did not see them as things that had to be either believed or rejected. He saw them as symbols, mirrors reflecting the inner world of humanity. That means, even if a myth is not historically true, it may still express a profound truth about the human soul. Perhaps Atlantis is the clearest example. The name Atlantis first appeared in Plato's dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He described a mighty island, rich, powerful, extraordinarily advanced. Yet, because of arrogance and moral corruption, Atlantis was punished by the gods. In a single day and night, the entire island disappeared beneath the sea. For more than 2,000 years, humanity has continued searching for Atlantis. Some believe it lies somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Others place it in the Mediterranean. Some theories associate it with the island of Santorini. Others move it all the way to the Caribbean. To this day, no archaeological evidence has confirmed the existence of Atlantis exactly as Plato described it. Science must acknowledge that honestly. Yet what is remarkable is that, despite never being proven, Atlantis continues to live powerfully within the human imagination. Why? Perhaps because Atlantis is not merely a city. It is a symbol of the fear that every civilization, no matter how magnificent, may one day disappear. A symbol of the fragility of power. A symbol of the belief that beneath the waters there are still mysteries waiting to be discovered. Jung probably would not have asked, "Did Atlantis really exist?" He might have asked something entirely different. Why does every generation need Atlantis? That is a profoundly different question, because once we ask it, we are no longer searching only for an island. We begin searching for ourselves. Perhaps every human being carries an Atlantis within, a part of ourselves that was once vibrant but has since been forgotten, an old dream, a childhood memory, a belief that once burned brightly, not gone, only submerged within the deeper layers of the unconscious. That is what Jung called the collective unconscious. According to him, beneath every individual's personal thoughts lies a deeper layer where humanity shares the same timeless images and symbols. Perhaps that is why stories of drowned cities do not belong only to Greece. They appear across countless cultures, as though all of us are remembering something, even though none of us truly knows what we are remembering. If Atlantis belongs primarily to the realm of legend, then Yonaguni in Japan occupies a far more intriguing position. In 1986, a diver discovered enormous stone formations beneath the waters off Yonaguni Island. Broad, flat surfaces, stepped terraces, perfectly sharp angles. Seen from a distance, they reminded many people of pyramids or massive man-made stairways. Immediately, theories began to emerge. Some believed they were the remains of an ancient civilization swallowed by the sea. Others called them Japan's Atlantis. Science, however, has remained cautious. Even today, geologists and archaeologists continue to debate the site. Many researchers argue that most of Yonaguni's formations were created naturally through the geological characteristics of sandstone and ancient fault lines. Others suggest that humans may have modified certain portions of the formation. What matters most is this: as of today, there is still no scientific consensus that Yonaguni is a submerged city, and perhaps that is exactly what makes science so beautiful. Science does not rush. The layers of sediment continue to settle. The continents themselves continue to drift. Volcanoes continue to breathe beneath the surface. The Earth has never truly been still. Only our lives are too brief to notice. Carl Gustav Jung often reminded us that maturity begins when we stop trying to control everything and begin learning to cooperate with reality. Perhaps civilizations are invited to learn the very same lesson. No city, however magnificent, ever truly conquers nature. At best, it learns to live with it for a while. That realization is not meant to inspire fear. It is meant to awaken humility. When we look back upon the submerged streets of Pavlopetri, the temples of Thonis Heracleion, the villas of Baiae, or the silent neighborhoods of Port Royal, we should not see failures. We should see conversations between humanity and the planet it calls home. Every civilization writes its story upon the landscape. Then, sooner or later, the landscape writes something back, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, but always patiently. That may be the greatest lesson hidden beneath the sea. Nature is not our enemy, nor is it our servant. It is simply the larger story within which our own stories unfold. Perhaps that is why standing beside the ocean often makes us feel strangely small, not because the sea wishes to diminish us, but because it reminds us of scale. Our lives last decades. Empires last centuries. Civilizations may endure for millennia. The Earth measures its history in millions of years. Against that vast horizon, humility becomes not a weakness, but a form of wisdom. Jung believed that true wisdom comes from recognizing both our strength and our limitations. A person who believes they control everything becomes fragile. A person who understands what cannot be controlled becomes resilient. The same is true for societies. History repeatedly shows that the greatest civilizations were not those that imagined themselves invincible. They were those capable of adapting, learning, rebuilding, beginning again. Perhaps this is why the submerged cities continue to fascinate us. Not because they prove that humanity always loses, but because they reveal that humanity always continues. One city disappears, another rises. One harbor falls silent, another fills with ships. Generations come and go, yet the human desire to build, to explore, to trade, to love, and to hope never disappears. It simply finds new shores. There is something deeply comforting in that thought, because the true inheritance of civilization has never been its stone walls. It has always been its stories. Stone can sink, wood can decay, bronze can corrode, even marble eventually yields to time. But stories travel, from parent to child, from teacher to student, from archaeologist to reader, from one generation to the next. Every submerged city is, in the end, a library, not because of the buildings themselves, but because every street preserves a lesson. Every harbor remembers a journey. Every temple recalls a question about meaning. Every home whispers of ordinary people who once believed tomorrow would arrive just as peacefully as today. And perhaps that is why these cities still matter. They remind us that history is not separate from us. We are history in progress. The streets we walk today may one day become archaeological sites. The harbors we build may someday rest beneath different coastlines. The technologies we celebrate may one day seem as distant as bronze tools or Roman mosaics. Future generations may study our cities with the same curiosity that we now bring to theirs. They may wonder what we believed, how we loved, how we raised our children, how we understood the world. And perhaps they will discover that, despite all our inventions, we carried the same hopes as those who lived thousands of years before us. To build a home, to protect our families, to leave something meaningful behind. That continuity is perhaps the most extraordinary discovery archaeology has ever made. Human history changes. Human nature changes far more slowly. Carl Gustav Jung devoted his life to exploring the symbols hidden within the human soul. Archaeology explores the symbols left behind in stone. Together, they tell the same quiet story, that beneath changing languages, changing empires, changing religions, and changing technologies, something profoundly human endures. Perhaps that is the greatest treasure hidden beneath the sea. Not gold, not marble, not lost kingdoms, but perspective. The understanding that every civilization is both fragile and magnificent, temporary and meaningful, small within the universe, yet immeasurably important to those who lived within it. As our journey slowly comes to its end tonight, allow your thoughts to drift once more across the calm surface of the sea. Imagine the waves growing quieter, the moonlight stretching gently across the water. Far below, ancient streets remain exactly where they have rested for centuries. Silent, patient, unhurried. They ask nothing from us, except one thing: to remember. To remember that greatness is never measured only by what survives. Sometimes it is measured by what continues to inspire long after it has disappeared. And perhaps that is why the oceans continue to guard these sleeping cities so faithfully. Not to hide them forever, but to reveal them when humanity is finally ready to understand what they have been trying to teach all along. So as the night grows deeper, let these ancient cities slowly fade into the stillness once again. Let the waves carry away the noise of the day. Let history settle gently into your thoughts, not as a collection of dates and ruins, but as a quiet reminder that every ending becomes the beginning of another story. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful journey beneath the sea. If you found comfort, wonder, or a new way of seeing the past, I hope you'll return for another quiet exploration through history. Until then, may your mind be at ease, your dreams be gentle, and your sleep be deep and peaceful. Perhaps this is also a beautiful lesson for our own lives. We often believe that loving something means holding on to it, owning it, keeping it close. But archaeology quietly teaches a different kind of love. Sometimes the deepest respect is shown by leaving something exactly where it belongs. Carl Gustav Jung believed that genuine understanding begins when we stop trying to dominate and begin learning to listen. Perhaps history asks the same of us, not to conquer the past, not to collect it, but to understand it. Every submerged city is a reminder that humanity is not the owner of history. We are only its temporary guardians. That may be why modern underwater archaeology has changed so profoundly over the last few decades. Its purpose is no longer to recover as many artifacts as possible. Its purpose is to preserve as much meaning as possible. Meaning lives in relationships. A temple belongs beside its harbor. A marketplace belongs beside its streets. A family home belongs within its neighborhood. History is not a collection of isolated objects. It is a living network of connections. Break those connections, and the story grows quieter. Preserve them, and the city continues to speak. Perhaps this is why underwater archaeologists often describe themselves not as treasure hunters, but as listeners, they descend into silence. They move carefully. They record patiently. They disturb as little as possible, because every grain of sand may preserve a sentence. Every layer of sediment may protect another chapter. Every untouched room may still contain a story no human has heard for thousands of years. There is something deeply moving about that patience. In a world that often celebrates speed, archaeology celebrates slowness. In a culture that rewards possession, archaeology rewards understanding. In an age that constantly searches for something new, archaeology reminds us of the value of what has always been there. Jung often observed that the deepest transformations happen quietly, not through dramatic moments, but through careful attention. Perhaps that is why archaeology feels almost meditative. It asks us to slow down, to notice, to observe before acting, to understand before judging. Those are qualities that benefit not only science, but life itself. When we look at a submerged city, we are looking at more than ruins. We are looking at an interrupted conversation, a conversation between neighbors, between merchants and sailors, between parents and children, between worshippers and their gods, between one generation and the next. The archaeologist's task is not to invent that conversation. It is simply to hear what still remains. That is why every excavation carries an enormous responsibility. Once an artifact is removed, its environment changes forever. Once a layer of sediment is disturbed, it can never be replaced exactly as it was. Excavation, in many ways, is an irreversible act. For that reason, the most responsible archaeologists often choose not to excavate at all. Instead, they document, they photograph, they scan, they create detailed digital models. They leave the city resting peacefully beneath the water until future generations possess even better technology and deeper knowledge. There is remarkable wisdom in that restraint. It recognizes that our knowledge is always incomplete, that tomorrow's scientists may understand what today's researchers cannot yet see. In that sense, archaeology is an act of generosity across time. Each generation preserves questions for the next, instead of pretending to possess every answer. Perhaps that, too, reflects something deeply human. We inherit the world from those who came before us. We care for it for a little while, then we pass it forward. The cities beneath the sea remind us that history is never truly ours to own. It is ours to protect. As our journey draws toward its final chapters, another quiet realization begins to emerge. The greatest treasure preserved beneath the ocean has never been gold. It has never been jewels. It has never even been magnificent temples or royal palaces. The greatest treasure is memory itself. The memory of ordinary people whose names have been forgotten but whose lives still echo through stone streets, silent harbors, humble kitchens, and peaceful cemeteries. Every submerged city tells us the same gentle truth. Civilizations do not become meaningful because they last forever. They become meaningful because, while they existed, they gave people a place to love, to hope, to work, to dream, and to belong. Perhaps our own cities will one day become history as well. Perhaps future generations will walk through digital reconstructions of the places we now call home. They may wonder who we were, what we valued, how we treated one another, what stories we chose to preserve. That thought does not have to fill us with sadness. Instead, it offers a quiet invitation to build wisely, to care deeply, to leave behind not merely monuments, but kindness, not merely buildings, but understanding, not merely achievements, but humanity. For in the end, history remembers far more than what we constructed. It remembers how we lived. And perhaps that is the most enduring lesson every sleeping city beneath the sea has been waiting to teach us. Not everything precious needs to be possessed. Some things only need to be understood. Some memories do not need to be brought home. It is enough to know that they are still there, quietly, peacefully, protected by time itself. And it is through this very spirit that humanity has arrived at a deeper understanding. Submerged cities do not belong to any individual. They do not belong to a collector. They do not belong to a single nation. They belong to the shared memory of humankind. Perhaps, after traveling together through so many cities sleeping beneath the sea, we begin to realize that archaeology is not a conversation with stones. It is a conversation with time. Each time a research team descends beneath the waves, their goal is not to recover as many artifacts as possible. Their goal is to listen to the stories that history still wishes to tell. For centuries, countless shipwrecks were discovered simply because of the gold, silver, and precious jewels they contained. Many priceless artifacts were brought to the surface, sold at auction, or placed into private collections. At first glance, that may seem like rescuing history from the depths of the sea, but in reality, countless stories disappeared at the very same moment. Because once an artifact is removed without carefully documenting its exact position, its depth, its relationship to surrounding objects, and the structure of the site itself, history is no longer complete. The vessel may still exist, but the story of the person who once used it is gone. A sword may be polished and displayed behind museum glass, yet the context in which it rested beside human remains or within the hull of an ancient ship may never be reconstructed again. That is why modern archaeology emphasizes one essential principle. Heritage is not only the artifact, heritage is also its context. It was from this understanding that the international community developed an entirely new approach to underwater cultural heritage. In 2001, UNESCO adopted the Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage, affirming that submerged cities, ancient shipwrecks, and underwater archaeological sites are not simply resources to be exploited. They are part of the shared memory of humanity. There is something profoundly beautiful about that idea, because memory belongs to no one alone. An ancient Egyptian city does not belong only to Egypt. A Roman harbor does not belong only to Italy. A prehistoric village beneath the Mediterranean does not belong only to the nation whose coastline lies closest to it. They all belong to the story of humanity. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." Perhaps preserving history is also a journey of growth. Once, humanity believed that discovering something meant owning it. Today, we are beginning to understand that discovery does not necessarily require possession. Sometimes maturity means knowing when to stop, to observe, to preserve, to allow the past to continue resting in the most natural way possible. That requires extraordinary patience, because when standing before a perfectly preserved statue that has rested beneath the sea for 2,000 years, the first instinct for many people is to raise it to the surface, to touch it, to display it, to admire it up close. But archaeologists often ask a different question. Would moving it cause us to lose something even more valuable? Quite often, the answer is yes. A statue standing among the foundations of its ancient temple tells a far richer story than the same statue standing alone inside a museum gallery. An anchor lying beside a shipwreck speaks more powerfully than the anchor itself. A clay vessel still resting inside an ancient kitchen allows us to imagine the daily life of a family who lived thousands of years ago. Modern archaeology has therefore become less an art of excavation than an art of listening. Humanity is learning not to disturb history more than necessary. We use 3D scanning, digital modeling, and ultra-high-resolution imagery to study archaeological sites while preserving them exactly as they are. It is remarkable to realize that as science advances, humanity becomes more humble. We no longer strive to conquer everything. We strive to understand. Perhaps that mirrors our own journey through life. When we are young, we want to hold on, to possess, to control. But as the years pass, we slowly discover that the most valuable things are not always meant to belong to us. Some things are simply meant to be cherished. Some things deserve only our respect. Some of the most beautiful memories are not the ones we pull out of the past. They are the ones we allow to remain whole. Jung believed that maturity is not about endlessly collecting new experiences. It is about learning to reconcile ourselves with what already exists within us. Underwater archaeology carries that same spirit. It does not seek to rewrite history. It patiently listens to history with profound respect. Perhaps that is why archaeologists move so slowly. Not because they lack technology, but because they understand that every step is taken upon thousands of years of memory. Every layer of sediment they uncover is a page of a book that can never be closed again. Every excavation is a responsibility carried on behalf of generations yet to come. History is not a gift that any one generation has the right to keep for itself. It is a legacy passed from one generation to another, from one century to the next. When we begin to see it this way, the ocean takes on an entirely different meaning. It is no longer a place that hides treasure. It becomes an immense library. Within that library, every submerged city is a book. Every shipwreck is a chapter. Every artifact is a single sentence. The purpose of archaeology is not to tear those pages away. It is to learn how to read them with patience and care. Perhaps that is the final lesson these sleeping cities wish to offer us. The greatest value of the past does not lie in what we can possess. It lies in our ability to listen, to understand, and to preserve. For only when we learn to honor humanity's shared memory can we truly understand our own place within the endless flow of time. And from that profound stillness, our journey finally approaches its closing chapter. There, every submerged city, every underwater road, every coral-covered temple, and every story that has slept for thousands of years comes together into one final message. The ocean has never merely buried history. In its own quiet way, it has always been preserving the memory of humankind. If you have stayed with me throughout tonight's journey from the ancient streets of Pavlopetri, the silent harbors of Heracleion, and the submerged villas of Baiae, to the stories that exist somewhere between history and legend, like Atlantis and Dwarka, perhaps you now realize that these underwater cities have never simply been stories about disappearance. At first, we tend to see them as tales of defeat, a civilization overcome by nature, a city swallowed by the sea, a community forced to abandon its homeland. But if we stop there, we miss the most important truth. For beneath layers of sediment and beneath the still waters of the ocean, what remains is not merely ruined stone. What remains is life. Every underwater street was once walked by countless people. Every harbor once welcomed ships returning home after months at sea. Every temple once echoed with prayers offered in hope. Every marketplace once rang with laughter, bargaining, and the countless ordinary conversations that made a city feel alive. Today, we call them ruins. But for the people who once lived there, they were simply another ordinary day. Perhaps this is what makes archaeology so deeply moving. It does not merely bring us closer to kings or famous battles. It brings us back to ordinary people. A mother preparing the evening meal, a craftsman repairing his fishing boat before sunrise, a child running across the town square, a merchant inspecting freshly arrived amphorae filled with olive oil, an old man quietly watching the sea change color beneath the evening sky. None of them knew that thousands of years later, the place they called home would lie beneath the ocean. Nor could they imagine that their ordinary lives would one day become part of humanity's shared history. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Perhaps the same is true of civilizations. A city does not become great because of towering walls or magnificent palaces. It becomes meaningful because of the people who truly lived there, because of the dreams they pursued, the people they loved, the values they left behind. When we look down upon submerged cities, we are not simply witnessing an ending. We are witnessing an entire lifetime of living. That is a very different thing. An ancient tree that falls does not erase the centuries during which it offered shade to countless travelers. A star that burns out does not erase the light it has already sent across millions of years of space. And a city that sinks beneath the sea does not erase the lives it once nurtured. Perhaps that is why the ocean always reminds me of memory. At first glance, water seems to erase every trace. Waves wash away the sand. The tides reshape the shoreline. Salt slowly wears down stone. But the more we learn, the more we discover that the ocean does not merely erase, it also remembers. Soft layers of sediment have protected ancient streets. Oxygen-poor waters have preserved fragile artifacts that would have long disappeared on land, and the darkness of the deep has safeguarded traces of history that sunlight itself might have erased long ago. There is a beautiful paradox here. The very place once believed to be the end of these cities became the place that preserved their memories. Carl Gustav Jung devoted much of his life to studying memory and the unconscious. He believed that not everything that disappears from conscious awareness is truly lost. Some experiences simply sink deeper. They are no longer present in our daily thoughts, yet they continue, quietly, to shape who we are. He once wrote, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good." Perhaps the ocean is much like the unconscious mind of the earth. On the surface, we see only the waves, but in its depths, the memories remain intact. These submerged cities are the ancient dreams of humanity. They no longer appear on our maps, yet they continue to exist within the current of time. That is why every underwater archaeological discovery carries such a unique feeling, not because we have found another statue or another clay vessel, but because we have heard a voice that has been silent for thousands of years. Each artifact feels like a whisper, never loud, never hurried, only gently saying, "We once lived here, we once loved. We too worried about tomorrow. We also believed our city would last forever." And then, time continued to move forward. The sea continued to rise. Yet those stories never disappeared. They simply found a new way to be told. Human voices became the sound of waves. Streets became layers of sediment. The memory of one community became the memory of all humanity. Perhaps that is the greatest gift these submerged cities leave behind. Not sorrow, not regret, but a quiet faith that as long as someone is willing to listen, history will never truly disappear. There is something wonderfully strange about history. We often believe that history is written by the victors, but after all our journeys beneath the sea, perhaps we begin to realize that what survives the longest is not always victory. What remains are the traces of life itself: a road, a well, a worn stone step, a small fragment of pottery, an ancient anchor covered with coral. None of these speak of power, they speak of people. Perhaps that is why submerged cities touch us so deeply. They do not tell us that humanity failed. They tell us that humanity lived, that people loved, that they hoped, that they built homes believing their children and grandchildren would one day live there, that they planted the first seeds in fields beside the sea, that they looked toward the horizon believing another ship would return tomorrow. Every civilization begins with hopes as simple as these. Not with empires, not with monuments, but with ordinary people. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote, "Life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research." Of course, the quote is often taken humorously, but if we look a little deeper, it reveals something quietly beautiful. Life itself is a journey of learning. Civilizations are no different. No civilization begins in perfection. Every generation is learning, experimenting, making mistakes, growing wiser, and sometimes those very mistakes become the greatest gifts they leave behind for the future. Perhaps that is why we should not look upon these submerged cities with sadness. We should look upon them with gratitude, grateful that they lived long enough to leave their footprints behind, grateful that they built enough for us to continue learning today, grateful that despite nature's uncertainty, they never stopped creating. They knew the sea could change its course. They knew the earth could tremble. They knew floods would come, yet they still built homes, opened marketplaces, raised temples, raised children, loved one another. Perhaps that is the most admirable thing of all. Not that they believed they would live forever, but that they chose to live fully, even knowing that everything is temporary. Throughout our journey, we have spoken of the sea many times. The sea as a destructive force, the sea as a keeper of memory, the sea as the unconscious mind of the earth. But in the end, perhaps the ocean carries one more meaning. It is a reminder of balance. Land and water have never truly been separate worlds. The shoreline we see today is only a temporary boundary. It shifts with each day, each season, each century, each millennium. Human beings often forget this. We build cities as though the ground beneath us will remain forever still. We raise magnificent monuments as though time itself will pause. Yet nature quietly continues following its own rhythm, never hurried, never angry, never biased, only patient. Jung spent his life speaking about the balance between consciousness and the unconscious. He believed that a healthy person is not someone who eliminates the darkness. It is someone who learns to live in harmony with it. Perhaps civilizations must learn the same lesson. Not to conquer nature, but to live in harmony with it. Not to rule over the ocean, but to understand it. Not to forget that we belong to the earth, but to remember that we are only a very small part of this planet's long history. There is one thought that always brings me peace. Perhaps thousands of years from now, many of our modern cities will have changed as well. The coastlines will be different. The harbors will be different. The buildings we know today may no longer exist. But if people of the distant future were to discover the traces we leave behind, I doubt the first question they would ask would be how many stories our skyscrapers once had. They would want to know how we lived, how we treated one another, whether we knew how to love, whether we cared for the planet we called home, whether we left something worthy for those who came after us. Those are the questions every civilization leaves behind, and they are the very same questions each of us can begin asking ourselves today. After everything, these submerged cities are far more than archaeological sites. They are mirrors. Every time we look down into the sea, we are not simply looking into the past. We are looking into the possibilities of our own future. For every civilization stands upon a remarkably fragile boundary, between land and water, between memory and oblivion, between creation and loss, between confidence and humility. Perhaps that is the greatest gift the ocean has ever given humanity. It has preserved far more than ancient stones. It has preserved lessons, lessons that never grow old. Lessons reminding us that the true strength of a civilization is not measured by how long it survives, but by the values it leaves behind after it is gone. And as the night slowly draws to a close, perhaps we begin to realize that this journey was never only about traveling through submerged cities. It has been a journey into the memory of humanity, a journey into the deepest layers of the human soul, and, perhaps most importantly, a journey back to ourselves. For just as the ocean quietly preserves ancient cities, each of us quietly carries within our own hearts the memories, hopes, and dreams that have shaped who we are today. Perhaps that is the most precious city any of us will ever protect. And now, as tonight's journey gently comes to an end, the ocean beyond our imagination remains as quiet as it has been for millions of years. The waves continue to kiss the shore. The tides continue their silent rhythm, rising and falling without end. Somewhere beneath those deep blue waters, ancient streets still rest in darkness. Stone stairways continue to wait with endless patience. Harbors that once welcomed countless ships are now visited only by small schools of fish drifting peacefully through the silence. Temples that once echoed with prayers are now embraced by coral and the soft light filtering through the sea. Yet if you listen carefully, you may realize that those places have never truly fallen silent. History does not speak through sound. History speaks through presence. Every city beneath the sea is like a letter sealed by time, never hurried, never demanding to be opened, simply waiting for the day humanity becomes humble enough to read it. Perhaps, after everything we have explored together, the greatest treasure is not learning the name of another ancient city, or the exact date of an earthquake long ago. The greatest treasure is learning to see history with different eyes, no longer as dates, no longer as dynasties, no longer as wars, but as lives, as people who loved, who hoped, who worried, who dreamed of giving their children a better tomorrow. They never imagined that thousands of years later someone would discover their footprints, just as we ourselves have no idea how future generations will remember the lives we are living today. Carl Gustav Jung reminded us that the most important journey is not the one that carries us the farthest, it is the one that carries us deepest into ourselves. Perhaps that is why this voyage beneath the sea has never truly been a journey beneath the ocean. It has been a journey beneath memory, beneath the layers of history, and deeper still, into the unconscious landscape of the human soul. There we discover a quietly comforting truth. The people who lived 4,000 years ago were not so different from us. They loved, they feared, they searched for meaning. They tried to build safe homes. They hoped tomorrow would be kinder than today. Perhaps those simple things are what endure the longest. Not stone walls, not empires, not magnificent palaces, but compassion, the desire to live, the courage to begin again after every loss. If these submerged cities have one lesson to offer us, perhaps it is simply this: treasure the present a little more. Slow down, take time to look up at the sky, listen to the wind, smile at the people you love. Because one day, those quiet moments will become memories too. And those ordinary memories may turn out to be the greatest treasures of all. Tonight, as you prepare to close your eyes, imagine yourself standing upon a peaceful shoreline. The water is perfectly still, like a mirror. Beneath its surface lie cities that have slept for thousands of years. But rather than feeling sadness, allow yourself to feel peace, because you know they have never truly disappeared. They are still there, gently protected by the ocean, quietly embraced by time, and kept alive through every generation that continues to love history. Perhaps, in our own way, each of us is also like a city. Within us are streets of memory, squares filled with joy, hidden corners of sorrow, dreams that have already come true, and dreams that are still patiently waiting. Do not forget them, for they are the places that have made you who you are today. Thank you for spending this peaceful time with me, walking through the waves of history and listening to stories that have rested beneath the sea for thousands of years. If tonight's journey has brought you even a little peace, a little inspiration, or simply helped your mind grow quieter after a long day, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel and join us again on future journeys. Together, we will continue exploring lost civilizations, the mysteries of history, and the hidden depths of the human mind through the timeless insights of Carl Gustav Jung, always with a calm, gentle rhythm, so that every evening becomes not only a time for rest, but also a quiet opportunity to see the world and ourselves a little more clearly. And now, allow your eyes to grow heavy. Let every thought slowly settle, like layers of fine sediment drifting gently to the floor of the ocean. Let your breathing become slow and effortless, and let the night wrap around you with its natural peace. May you sleep deeply, may you sleep peacefully, and perhaps, somewhere within tonight's dreams, you will once again find yourself walking softly along ancient streets beneath the sea, where history is still quietly whispering stories that have never truly come to an end. Good night, and until our next journey, sleep well.